Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. with Glenn Sutherland. This week, my guest is Samuel Herschorn. Samuel, you just want to start off by giving everyone a bit of an introduction to yourself a little bit, maybe your background story, how you got to what you're doing today. I want to start this podcast off by welcoming everyone to come down September 14th, 2024 to the Canadian Investing in the U.S. conference. It's being held at the Doubletree Hilton near the Toronto airport. We're giving away lots of free stuff. It includes a free lunch. You can find tickets at a Canadian Investing in the USA.com/conference. And I hope to meet everybody there. Anyway, back to the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
No problem.
I'm excited to tell you a bit about what I've been up to and to talk about real estate development. So my background is that I'm a licensed architect. Practicing here in Ontario, Canada. I've been in the industry for over a decade, designing buildings from industrial complexes. I've done some institutional work, as well as multifamily residential, custom homes, a wide range of projects during my career. I decided to branch off into real estate development because it aligned with my training, and it's kind of been the natural progression of my investing career. So I originally got started, going back to high school. I got into architecture because I really didn't go into the NBA because I was really a big basketball fan, and I played a lot of high-level basketball. But I quickly realized I wasn't fast enough, couldn't jump high enough, and I stopped growing in grade 8, so capped out at 6 foot. And you don't see too many 6 foot athletes in the NBA these days. So I quickly
even the ones that are
came
there,
to the realization,
they're considered the small guys. The ones who are there.
Exactly. They're the small guys, and they're incredibly talented because they have competed against thousands of people who are probably more physically gifted or advantageously tall. So it's really tough. It's really tough for them to get to where they are. And I never came close. But what I did learn was how to apply myself, how to train myself, and the mindset of what it takes to really grow something and take on a leadership role. What I also found in high school is that I was quite gifted artistically, but I had this inclination towards being practical and analytical. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I should go into law. I've got a number of family members who are lawyers, and I enjoyed the debates. I enjoyed the philosophical, questions that were raised in my law classes. But I had a teacher suggest, hey, why don't you try architecture? It's kind of a neat combination of that practical aspect with an artistic twist to it. So I got into Carleton at the School of Architecture and Urbanism, which was a very difficult program to get into. They only accept 80 students out of 1,500 applicants. And I decided, okay, it's the path less traveled. Let's give it a shot. And amazingly, it stuck. I got through my undergrad degree and got my first architecture job coming out of school. And it was a bit of a shock. I was being paid a little over minimum wage, working 50, 60 hours a week. And they didn't want to pay me overtime. And they said, you should be grateful that you just have a job and that you're gaining all of this valuable experience. And that was my wake-up call, because I realized I didn't want to be subservient to an employer my whole life. And I looked forward at the people I was learning from, and they were working just as hard as I was for marginally more pay. So I had that question: what's next? How do I live the life that I want and gain that financial independence? And that's when I picked up Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, as so many other investors do.
Yeah.
And that the premise of that book is you start a business, you put the cash flow into real estate, and you get this kind of compounding effect. And so as I thought more about it, I was like, okay, so I started trading on the stock market, teaching myself how to do that. But I was still looking for that connection. How do I merge my current training as an architect with real estate investing and investing in general? And that led me to development. Mainly, I was looking at some of my developer clients who were doing these multi-million dollar projects, who seemed to be pretty well off. And I thought, well, I'm doing probably 90% of the work for them.
Yeah.
Why can't I do it for myself? And it was around that time I met my business partner, Michael Davidson. We started coaching under another developer named Victor Minash. He's one of the partners at Y Street Capital.
I've been on his podcast.
And he's been on your podcast too. There you go. And so that's how we got started in development. Now I've got my own architecture firm, and that kind of pairs nicely with the real estate development company. And together we serve all of Ontario, mainly along the 401 corridor, but we go up north in Collingwood and Barrie area, and we've got most of our projects right now are actually in Ottawa. So I'm based out of Guelph. That's where I ended up, but we operate remotely. And Michael, he's up in Ottawa, so he's kind of our boots on the ground up there. I've got two other partners in the business. Graham Potter, he's a civil and structural engineer, and he heads up our analysis and underwriting division. And then an old university friend of mine, Dakota Scott, an architectural technologist, worked for Hatch Engineering and some of the largest architecture firms in Toronto. He came on and he handles a lot of the design, drafting, and project management work, whereas I oversee business operations and development.
That was exactly going to be my next question. I'm like, sounds like you've delegated a lot of this stuff. I'm like, what do you actually do? No, that's great. So when you're building this out, was the like, I know that you're already an architect and you brought in a lot of architects. But what I usually hear when people are talking this, they usually take on that role off the start. So maybe like, why strategize? Why bring on people to do the architectural work first? And actually, I kind of know the answer already. I'm going to ask you a question, but why go down that path of hiring out the jobs that you actually could have actually done yourself?
I recently had a phone call from someone who listens to the podcast. What they told me was that they'd sent money to a contractor. The contractor basically ran away with their money and didn't complete the job. Since I hate to hear about this happening to people, so because of this, I just created a video with a bunch of common mistakes that Canadians make. Sometimes it's because they're new to investing, and sometimes it's just they're new to U.S. rules or U.S. regulations. People can go through it and ideally try to make way fewer mistakes, because I don't want to see anyone else lose their money. If you're interested in this video, go to a Canadian investing in the USA.com/mistakes. I hope this helps some people. Back to the podcast.
Okay, so I'll start by addressing the point, why would you hire an architect? Because I think that's important for a lot of investors wanting to get into development.
Yeah.
Your architect is your right-hand man, because they lead the entire development and process. We know them more on the design side, creating these intricate and elaborate structures and buildings. But what we really specialize in is project management. Because we are generalists, we have a decent understanding of all of a building's systems and the processes and components that are required, as well as the planning process, which is kind of the two phases of development. You've got the planning side, that means dealing with all your approvals and getting your project to permit ready. And then you've got the construction side, and that's building the building. And in between, your architect's guiding you through that process, delivering the drawings and the reports and the applications that are required to get your approvals, then to get the project priced out, hire your contractor, and get it built. So that's why we work so closely with the developers, and we also work closely with the other consultants and, in the end, the contractor who does the work. Because you need that quarterback who sees the plays ahead of time and is calling the plays, and then throws the ball to the receiver for that touchdown. Now, the second question you had was, why aren't I doing it myself? Well, I am. And that's why I started Biosis Designs, my architecture firm.
Right.
So Biosis Designs, we are ramping up our staffing. We are taking outside clients, but the purpose of me starting it was to serve the development side. So the development company will find the deals, put them together, raise the capital, and then it passes it on to my architecture firm that will oversee the project design, administration, and construction.
Okay. I have a question. So I've seen a bunch of different architects that they kind of have a building that they've kind of built, and then they try to repeatedly build that same kind of building, right? Because a lot of the work has been done. First of all, is that kind of something that you guys do, or is it, I'm just curious, like, when you're looking for a piece of land, does it have to meet a certain criteria to fit kind of buildings that you've already done, or what's kind of the idea behind what you're looking for?
Yeah. It's an interesting perspective. So every site is unique. It's going to have its own challenges. It's got its own dimensions, regulations that all have to be adjusted. But to come up with a unique design for every single site requires, 2 to 3 times more work than if you were able to just replicate one design.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't replicate one design because every site is unique. So it's kind of this loop almost, where you're trying to optimize your design in a way that makes it as economically viable and cost effective. But at the same time, you are trying to fit a constantly shifting target depending on where you're looking and what deals are coming along and what municipalities you're operating under. So as you get bigger, it becomes a little bit more difficult to standardize things. Mm-hmm. But we've got a client that we're actually looking to work with who requested that we design a prototype model of a 10-unit building that they could then replicate on multiple different sites. And the reason why that could work is because they're looking at one specific geographic area. Yeah. So only one municipality to deal with. You understand all the zoning bylaws, and we're able to create this standardized design that would meet the zoning bylaws. Then what we have to do is, when we find a specific site that qualifies, then we just tweak the design to fit within the context of the site. And it's this model that would allow us to replicate this design and do it very quickly and get some scale behind it. The other strategy, if you're not able to replicate things that easily, is to create a standard set of specifications. So maybe you've got an in with a supplier for a siding, a siding company that can get you a siding that's 30% less than market value. Well, you're going to want to use that across multiple projects because savings are already built in there, and you're purchasing it in bulk, and you're able to install it across multiple sites. So that's where it makes sense to start putting together these specs for materials that you can replicate. And the result is that, yes, you're kind of building a design that looks similar across the board. And you would be saving time from a designer's perspective because they don't have to continually find new products and they can kind of replicate an aesthetic. So you're saving money there, as well as time. So that's the alternative strategy is standardizing your materials and your processes, because you've created those relationships where you can get better deals on supply with suppliers.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Anything you can do that. And honestly, I would even say, like, if you're as long as you're not building them right next door to each other, like, no one's going to really know that they're, basically the same building. But you look at, like, even like a lot of the new subdivisions around any city, they all do look the same.
Oh, yeah. And that's another example where you create kind of a standard design and you're tweaking it for each lot.
Yeah.
And a developer who's doing a subdivision might have 3, maybe 4 different designs. They all have very similar floor plans, but they're switching up the materials to give it a fresh look. Or maybe it's, one site is rectangular, but the next site is more triangular because of the way the lot fits. So they'll have one model for the rectangular lots and another one for the triangular lots. But then they're replicating that across the site.
Yep. And you were buying in a bunch of different spots. So what is it that makes a piece of land, or hits your criteria? Is it, like, maybe I won't speculate at this, but what is it that makes it that's appealing to you?
Yeah. So our process is we start with the macro overview. So we're looking for markets that are growing. We're looking for markets with very stable employment and diverse employment. If you only have one large employer in an area and they decide to up and leave, well, then everyone, like, the market's going to stall. No one's going to want to live there because there's nowhere for them to work. And people are probably going to leave, which means that you're going to have less competition for places to live, for rentals. Rates are going to drop, and it's just bad news. So we try to identify growth markets, stable employment, ideally lower crime rates, and we go through a long checklist to figure out where we want to be. Then we narrow down to the hyperlocal. So where's the property situated within these markets? Is it walking distance to amenities, grocery stores, shopping centers? Is there public transit nearby? What makes this site an attractive place to live? So we have another series of checklists that we go through to identify that. And then we look at the site itself. So what are the dimensions of the site? Will it allow for multifamily development? Is it more of a single family lot? If we tend not to do one-off housing anymore these days, that's more for a private investor who maybe wants to build a custom home. In which case, we'd happily come on as a designer, but as developers, we're kind of focused on multifamily and larger apartment buildings these days. But we will do things like stacked townhouse developments. So then we got to evaluate, does the zoning bylaw allow for high density, low density? Does it allow for greater height, or is it all low rise? And that's going to dictate what the strategy is. If it's a narrower lot, but it allows for 6 stories, then we'll design and model our underwriting to suit that. Whereas if it's maybe a wider lot, but it doesn't allow more than 3 stories, well, maybe a stacked townhouse development would be the better approach than like an apartment building.
Okay. So you just talked about a lot of market analysis. So when you're looking, are you first starting with the market analysis and going, hey, that this is a specific area is where we want, and then you can get like a broker or someone to, try to hunt for land in that area? Or do you just get sent some land and then you see if it fits the criteria of, the density, the land, the population, the employment, all that stuff? Which direction do you go in?
Kind of a bit of both. So we know some markets that we really like, Ottawa being one of them.
Yeah.
So we've cultivated some relationships with brokers who are boots on the ground, knocking on the doors in the areas that we like in Ottawa. And then we're also reaching out to broker or dealers who've got land for sale. But we're also being sent deals all over Ontario from brokers that we've met and we have relationships with. And not all of these deals fit the criteria. So it's very important to take it through a quick kill where we run some back of the napkin calculations to see, does it meet our basic criteria to move forward? And if not, then we pass. So that we're not, using up a lot of our time on deals that are never going to materialize. And if it passes that quick kill, then we start doing the full analysis, and that's our market analysis, then the location analysis and the site analysis, to the point where we're actually producing these concept designs that would allow us to reflect the zoning bylaw for the site, what the as of right is, what we think we would like to build, and get highly accurate numbers that we can plug into our underwriting and tell us whether the project's going to work or not. So there's kind of levels there on how we're analyzing it, a very high level, very quick kill, and then drilling down until we get to a very detailed level of analysis to initiate the next phase of development.
Okay. And then, like, you just mentioned zoning a few times, and I guess it's probably that you have like a project you kind of have in mind that you want to do. So I'm assuming that, that way you can just narrow down like all this stuff that's zoned certain, I won't name a whole bunch of zones, but you can just narrow it down and just cut them right off the list.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got our niche market, we'll call it, where we're focused on low to mid-rise construction, so up to 6 stories. We're looking at a potential 9-story project, but that one's stepping a bit outside of what we tend to focus on. Yeah. But generally, it's up to 6 stories. Medium to high density, meaning you want a higher number of units per hectare allowed by the zoning bylaw, and the reason is that we want to keep this mainly wood frame construction. Once you start getting into concrete and steel, the costs jump up, and you need much higher density, which means you have to go taller, which has a lot of logistical implications, as well as cost implications. So we're trying to fill the missing middle, which you hear a lot, but also we're kind of in between where the smaller investors and developers might focus on some single family or 5 to 12 units. We're a little bit higher. We tend to look at projects between 20 to 120 units. That's kind of our focus. And that means we're small enough that we're not competing directly with the really big developers who are looking for 250 to 1,000 unit developments and who swing a lot more capital and influence than we do. Whereas our projects wouldn't really meet their criteria, but we're also not dealing with the much smaller projects. We're leaving those to the smaller retail investors to handle. So kind of in the middle there, which allows us to maximize our return on investment.
Cool. I was thinking maybe should I ask you this question more closer to the start, but what is the kind of business plan? Are you building for somebody else, or do you guys build it yourself and then sell it at the end, or do you build it, tenant it, and keep it? Like what's your sort of business plan?
Yeah, our plan is always to build and hold. Yeah. But there are multiple exits along the way, which is one of the reasons why we like development so much. You can buy a plot of land, get it entitled, meaning get it site plan approved, and then flip it to another developer and make a tidy sum that way. And they'll take it and build it out and they'll make their own profit. Right. Or, we build it out ourselves and then we sell the finished product, or we build it out and we hold it. But the worst case scenario is always that you're going to take it right the way through. So that's what we underwrite to, as if we were going to take it all the way through. And that's also how we kind of prepare our investors to think about the project. Yes, there are opportunities to sell and recoup your money, but plan to hold it for the long term. if you need your money back in a year and a half, then this might not be the right investment for you.
This would be my last question before I talk about your company, but if you were going to talk to anyone who was either a small developer looking to get into this size of development or someone who was going to start going into development, do you have any tips or advice you'd give to them?
Yeah. Find a mentor, find someone who's done it. That was the catalyst for us. Working with Victor took us from being novices to being on our way to being real experts as developers. And we're still working with him. We're working with him on a couple projects right now. And it's been great because we continue to learn from someone who's been doing it for many, many years and has a lot of success doing it. And it makes us better as developers as well. So yeah, my advice, find a mentor, find or partner with someone who has done it and is doing it.
Well, that's great. That's a great advice. Honestly, I say that to everybody, even starting with some of the small stuff, and especially if you're doing something big, then you can even leverage their track record or contacts or something, right? There's ways to make this grow a lot easier than trying to do, redraw the, read for it. Anyway, my words are going mumbled too. Samuel, before we let you go, tell us a little bit about your company, and then how do we find you? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so you can find us at biosisrealestate.com, BIOSIS realestate.com. That's our website. We currently have a 66 unit apartment that we're pushing out. It's in the early design stages, and that's just in Ottawa and out in the Orleans area. Fantastic spot right next to the light rail transit station, across the street from the shopping center. So really a great location. And that one, we're actually in talks with the neighbor who's thinking about putting his land into the deal, and it could grow the project to over 100 units. So we're really excited about that one. We're looking at a land assembly in the Collingwood Barrie area, working with the owners there to put a deal together which could yield up to 600 units of housing. It'd probably be a mix of commercial space as well as apartments, and then single family duplex, triplex. But that one's like a 10-year project if we can get all the pieces to fit together. And then we're just about to go under contract for a property in Kemptville to build 48 stacked townhomes.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Samuel, that was interesting stuff. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and you sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That was a nice video. Bye.